You've spent 20 years on Capitol Hill, 4 terms in the House, right, and 2 in the Senate. And know you've talked about it before, but why did you decide in this last term that it was time for you to move on?
Well, every time I was up for re-election, I always went through a process in my mind of is it time for me to run again? Is it time for me not to run? And whatever, and you look at the pros and cons of it. I always wanted life after the Senate, and now my health is good, my energy level's still pretty high, and it was just time for me, if we were going to have that life after the Senate, to move on. I'm at the top of my game. I've been in the Senate for 12 years. For 10 of those years, I've either been chairman of a major committee or the ranking member of a major committee. Nobody else in the Senate today can say that. So I've been involved in writing 4 farm bills, 20 defense authorization bills, and been a major player on those 2 issues, which certainly drive the economy of Georgia. And it's just time for me to move on and let somebody else bring fresh ideas and fresh energy to the Senate. Yeah.
And I don't believe you defeated an incumbent that time. Somebody was retiring, is that correct? Notwithstanding, what was to you and is the significance of that election for your career and for your party?
Well, clearly, we took control of the House of Representatives in '94 for the first time in 42 years. Eisenhower was in office the last time Republicans controlled the House. And it was an opportunity to provide a different style of leadership that was going to change the direction of the country. And I think by virtue of the fact that we were re-elected for several more terms and retained power in the Senate, in the House, while the Senate was changing to a Democratic controlled body, shows you that the kind of leadership that the country was looking for was exhibited by the House of Representatives. Now, Speaker Gingrich was not Speaker for very long after I got there, but Denny Hastert came on board, provided good, solid leadership in the House. And when you look at the things that we accomplished, we reformed the welfare system, we balanced the budget of the country. Those types of things were important to people, and we did it. So from that standpoint, our class made history when we got there, and I think we continued to make history while we were there.
Obviously, that began for you in the years even before 9/11, and it's only intensified since. How did you come to focus on that area back in '94 when you were first elected?
Well, I was asked by the Speaker to go on the Intelligence Committee my last 2 years in the House. And he wanted me to
Now, the Speaker was which one?
Speaker Hastert.
Hastert, Dennis Hastert. Okay.
And Speaker Hastert wanted me to kind of pick an area of concentration in the world of intelligence, and in discussion with my staff and discussion with other folks who were in the intelligence world, we just happened to pick the area of terrorism and homeland security as something that we really wanted to focus on, not knowing, obviously, what was going to happen within a year, and that being September 11, 2001. I was very fortunate to be in that position in a way because as chairman of that subcommittee, we were thrust at the forefront of the investigation into the deficiencies in the intelligence world that led to 9/11 and 2001. And it just became a continued focus of mine, and because of my work there in the House, then Minority Leader Trent Lott, asked me to go on the Intelligence Committee in the Senate, and kind of the rest is history.
What were some of those deficiencies?
Well, what had happened in the intelligence world over the years is that we had a domestic intelligence operation that was conducted by the FBI. Then we had a foreign intelligence operation that was primarily headed up by the CIA as well as the Defense Intelligence Agency. Unfortunately, those 3 agencies did not communicate with each other in the way that they needed to. There were stovepipes built up within each agency, primarily within the FBI, that wouldn't even allow the intelligence operatives within the FBI to communicate on the terrorism side with the criminal side. We had to break down that wall lack of communication, both internally as well as externally with the other agencies. We knew, for example, that through our operations with NSA, the National Security Agency, that there were bad guys overseas talking to other bad guys inside the United States about the potential for an act of terrorism to occur here in the United States. But we didn't know exactly where the conversations were taking place. As it turned out, now we know that there were between operatives in San Diego and in Yemen who were planning September 11, and if we had had in place the particular laws that we have today and the communication between our agencies that we have today, we might have even prevented September 11 from happening.
We learned then, as Americans, since 9/11, about what we need to do, maybe what we don't need to keep doing in the interest of security, both domestically and internationally.
Well, one thing we need to do is make sure that we're controlling our borders so that we don't allow terrorists to cross the borders into this country without being identified. We have put in place a number of terrorist watch lists that will keep people off of airplanes if we know they've had a terrorist background. We don't let them fly into the country. But our southern border particularly is very porous, and we're having not only a lot of South Americans or Mexicans coming into the United States through the southern border, we're having a lot of Middle Eastern individuals coming through the southern border. We've got to do a better job of controlling those borders. Secondly, pre-9/11, we knew that this group called Al-Qaeda was training individuals inside of Afghanistan. We were monitoring some of that, but we weren't penetrating that organization to the point to where we really knew what was going on and what their plans and intentions were. We've done a better job of penetrating terrorist organizations through our ability to listen in on conversations of bad guys, through our ability to monitor them with predators now, and oftentimes even take out individuals with predator operations. So the world of technology has been a huge asset to our ability to pick up on terrorist activity and to interrupt and disrupt terrorist operations. But we're still not where we need to be. We've got a long ways to go. We've been able to stay ahead of the curve of terrorist organizations technologically, but when you see what's happening with groups like ISIS, they are now recruiting online. They're telling people, don't just carry out acts of terrorism with us in Syria or Iraq. Carry out acts of terrorism inside the United States. We'll help you do it by communicating with you online. That's a pretty dangerous situation, and it means that we have got to continue to work hard from a technology standpoint to stay ahead of these folks.
There's no border security on the internet.
Exactly. We need to change that. But, you know, I know people get upset that NSA may be listening in on phone calls. That is, if you're a bad guy, they ought to be listening in on your phone call. If you're not, then we don't need to be listening in, and we don't. We have safety measures put in place to do that. Likewise on the internet, if you're two bad guys communicating on the internet, we should have the ability and the capability to monitor their conversations on the internet. If you're not a bad guy, we shouldn't, and we don't. So it's an entirely different world we live in today than it was at 9/11 time.
Cleveland, 2002, was one of the more controversial races of that year. You received some criticism even from within your own party. What's your perspective on that election from 12 years later?
I would not change a thing. We ran a very strong race. Politics is it's a tough world, and you have to button up and go hard at it if you're going to be successful. I got criticized for one ad we ran. Well, people saw that one ad for simply what was in that ad. They knew nothing about what led up to that ad. And what led up to it was my opponent kept saying, well, you know, I support President Bush, who was very popular at the time, And I've been on board with President Bush when it comes to his Department of Homeland Security proposal. The fact of the matter is, he wasn't. And in the one ad that we ran that was somewhat controversial, we delineated in that ad 11 votes that Senator Cleland had made in opposition to the Bush proposal. That was the significance of that ad. He never responded to that because he couldn't respond. What they did was they threw up their hands and said we attacked his patriotism. We never attacked his patriotism. I've been foolish to do that. I respect the man. He was a great servant of this country. But we did attack his voting record, and we were right. And the people who saw the ad in Georgia, when they heard about this controversy outside of Georgia, they said, well, we don't understand what he's talking about, because they saw the ads leading up to that ad. The world who had wanted to plot and kill Americans, both of them did. And if we're going to protect the homeland, we needed to support the proposal that the president had laid out there. I supported it, and my opponent didn't, and that's what we pointed out.
One of the issues on which you've been most outspoken, and you've been involved in, obviously, in your role in intelligence, is the detention of the terror suspects at Guantanamo. What should be done with those people? It's been 13 years now. Will they ever be brought to trial? Will there ever be any resolution on that? Will they stay there forever? What needs to be done, in your opinion?
Some of those individuals can be released over a period of time if they're released to a country that is going to give them the right kind of supervision to ensure that they don't re-engage in the fight. Today we know that somewhere in the range of 30% of individuals who've been released from Guantanamo have re-entered the fight, and they're seeking to kill and harm Americans. We've got to make sure that anybody that comes out of Guantanamo does not have that opportunity. There's some folks who are in Guantanamo, and it's a small number, that never need to be released. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is the mastermind behind September 11. He should never be freed. He should never come to the United States to be tried. He should stay in Guantanamo until he dies. There are others there who are just as bad of actors as Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. They need to stay there. Guantanamo is a state-of-the-art facility. It is not the prison that it was when those early pictures were taken depicting it as a place that even America was not going to be very proud of. And we weren't. That's why we changed it. And we built this state-of-the-art prison, we built this state-of-the-art courtroom at Guantanamo, and we have the capability to try these individuals there. That's where they ought to be tried. If they're convicted, that's where they ought to be incarcerated forever.
And if they're acquitted, sent somewhere else?
The system is what it is, and I doubt that some of them will ever be tried because they shouldn't be tried. We have the laws on the books that will allow us under the law of war to retain those individuals indefinitely. And Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Abu Zubaydah are two of them.
Aspect of your career for which you probably received the most praise, including for whatever that's worth in this newspaper, is your effort to seek bipartisan consensus in a bitterly divided Congress. And one area in which you worked across the aisle, you mentioned a while ago, it's immigration reform. Talk about what you think needs to happen there.
Well, I think there's several things that needs to happen to fix this broken system that we've got. Number one, I don't care what we do relative to immigration reform. If we don't seal the border, it's not going to work. And when I say seal the border, I mean really seal the border. Let's not only keep bad guys from coming across, let's keep monitoring the good guys that are trying to come across for the right reason. And if they want to come across for the right reason, let's work out a program that lets them do that. Not give them citizenship, but let them come across for whatever that right reason is, and then go back home. Most of them want to do that anyway. For example, in the world of agriculture, we need foreign workers to come into this country to perform certain tasks that domestic workers are simply not going to do. And I know because I come from the heart of agriculture country in southwest Georgia. We need them, but we don't need them but a certain period of time for the planting and the harvesting of crops. When that time is up, then they should go back to wherever they came from. And we need to eliminate a lot of the red tape that's out there now, a lot of the expense involved on the farmer side to be able to get those people in here to do the work, to harvest the crops, and to send them back. If we act in a reasonable way and in a way that allows people to come in and ensures that they go back home, then we can make guest worker programs like that work. There's a whole nother issue out there that has got to be resolved. We don't know the number of people who are here illegally today.
That was my next question. What's the best current estimate?
It's been estimated somewhere between 10 to 12 million dollars, 12 million people, but that's purely an estimate. And we're not going to load all those people up and ship them back. They should not be granted a pathway to citizenship when other folks who have been working hard to become citizens have done it the right way. So we need to figure out some way, and that's what was done in the last immigration bill that passed the Senate. And frankly, I thought that part of the immigration bill was pretty well stated. I did not like the agriculture provision because it provided for an easy way to citizenship through agriculture, and that's not what we need. But there are rational people who have come up with some pretty good ideas of how to deal with individuals who are here illegally, and we need to figure out a way to bring them out of the shadows, to let them pay taxes, let them pay all the taxes they owe. If they have a criminal background, they need to be shipped out of here, or if they commit a crime, they need to be shipped out of here. But if they're here to improve the quality of life for them and their family, then there needs to be a way to deal with them that's different from the way we're dealing with them now. I think there are two countries in the world today that have that provision, and of course we're one of them. It makes no sense for that to be the case, but we'll never change that law. We don't have the votes in the Senate to change it. So I think what we've got to do is we've got to figure out a way to deal with that, and that's again a whole separate issue from the border security, from those that are here illegally, and now all of a sudden those that are here illegally but are the children of those here illegally. It's a very, very complex issue, and I'm just hopeful that in the next session of the Senate, that the rational people will get together and they'll figure out the answer to some of these difficult, complex issues.
One of the things you said was, this direct quote, "My most productive time in the Senate," you said, was your work with Mark Warner and the Gang of Six. And you went on to say that it represented, again, direct quote, "the best of everything about the Senate." Why is that? Why do you believe that that was the case?
Well, the Senate, unlike the House, has always been designed for cooperative spirit between different members from different parties to try to find that middle ground on these complex issues. The House was designed by the framers of the Constitution to be the firebrand unit, the partisan side of Congress. The Senate, on the other hand, has always been designed to be kind of the, as Jefferson said, the saucer, and let the hot coffee spill over into the saucer and cool off, and then things get done. Well, in our work with the Gang of Six, we were 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats. Philosophically, we were miles apart on 90% of the issues that we deal with every day. But on this issue, we knew that we needed to find a solution. And we compromised on numbers, we compromised on policy, but we never compromised on principle. We all walked out of there with a basic agreement that this is the way we need to go forward. And that's why I say that represents the very best of everything about the Senate. We came close to solving that problem. We had an overwhelming majority of the Senate that agreed with what we were doing. But unfortunately, the leadership of the Senate was not willing to bring up our proposal and require folks to make the hard and tough votes that are going to be necessary to really deal with this issue of the long-term debt. Too many people are worried about getting reelected instead of what's in the best interest of the country. I never worried about getting reelected. I always figured if you do the right thing, then your politics will take care of itself. And you get criticized by doing the right thing, but that's why we're sent there. If we were sent there to make just the easy decisions, serving in the Senate wouldn't be what it is designed to be. And making the hard and tough decisions is a challenge, but if you're in politics, that's the challenge you want.
When you were getting hammered on both Fox and MSNBC, you must be doing something right.
Doing something right, yeah.
In that same speech, you called attention to two specific issues that you'd like to see addressed. One was the rule change for votes on nominees, the 60-vote rule change, and the other one was debt reduction. Could you talk about those for just a second? I know one's more complex than the other, but start with the simpler one first.
On the rule change, I thought that was a huge mistake. It had the most negative impact on the institution of the Senate than anything that has ever happened in the history of the country relative to the way that our Congress works.
It's a sweeping indictment.
It was a bad move on the part of the Democrats to do that. And now I'm hopeful they're going to change it back, because if they don't, then there's no requirement on members on both sides of the aisle to work together on all issues, on the issues of judges and administrative nominees. If it only requires 51 votes, the minority party has no rights and no say-so. That's not the way the Senate was designed to operate. So I'm hopeful that since we Republicans have now will be coming into power in January, that they'll change it back in the other direction. I don't know whether they will or not, but I hope they do. And on the issue of the debt, look, this is choking us from the standpoint of not being able to increase the size of our military versus now we're having to decrease it. It's choking us from the standpoint of every single program out there. And if we do nothing, according to the Congressional Budget Office, by the year 2030, 100% of the tax revenue that comes in will go towards funding entitlements and Social Security and interest on the debt. Everything else we do will have to be done on borrowed money. And that's just saying to our children and grandchildren, y'all are going to have this choke around your neck forever and ever. That's not right. That's not the kind of legacy that I wanted to leave. And I know, because I know them all well, that most members of the House and the Senate don't want to leave.
It's going to take a combination of spending cuts, entitlement reductions, and revenue. And I think you said I know you said that you can't find enough spending cuts to deal with it all by itself. I know that ticked off some on the right, but so be it. And the tax part ticked off some on the left. So again, you're making everybody mad. But what are some of what kinds of entitlement reductions, tax reform things are you looking at?
Well, for example,
or are you hoping your successors look at, I should say?
If I truly retired today, I would have to go on Medicare. I have a policy of health insurance. I like the health insurance I have, and I'm going to continue to be employed so I can keep that policy. But when I retire, I have to go on Medicare. I would rather pay for my policy of health insurance and keep it and not go on Medicare. I'll still pay the premiums on Medicare, but I don't want to go on Medicare. And that seems like a simple common sense change, but it is very difficult to do in today's world in Washington. I think you've got to look at individuals who are drawing Social Security, and if you have an income of, I don't even know what the number ought to be, but let's say you got a retirement income of $1 million. do you really need $2,500 a month from Social Security? We could cut that back to $2,000 a month, and we would save billions and billions of dollars. That's what we call means testing.
Yeah, I just wrote down means testing.
From an entitlement standpoint, still provide Medicare and Social Security, which are going broke, by the way. If we don't do something, we're going to have to be funding them out of the general revenue, and there again, that goes direct to the deficit and thus the debt. So there are just an awful lot of common sense provisions that can be looked at and changed that will save and protect those programs and also address the long-term debt issue.
Who, in your opinion, are some of the opposition party's best people on the Hill right now?
Well, my friend Mark Warner is as good as it gets. Mark and I are good personal friends, and he's not only worked with me, he's worked with other members on our side of the aisle. Joe Manchin from West Virginia, really good guy, has made a real effort to work in a bipartisan way. I'll make some folks mad by saying this, but Chuck Schumer from New York is a results-oriented guy. Chuck and I worked on the issue of all of our folks that are overseas, whether in the military or the diplomatic corps. We thought they ought to be ensured the opportunity to vote. And when you have a short period of time, you can't get an absentee ballot mail to Dubai and get it back. So Chuck and I worked on that issue together and got some good legislation passed. But it's men like that that I think have provided good leadership, and they're going to be stronger in their bipartisan effort as they move forward, since now they're in the minority.
What do you think your successor, David Perdue, is going to bring to the table?
David is a good man. I've known him for several years. He brings the right kind of background, i.e. a business background, to Washington. He is finding out, the more he finds out about how Washington works, that it doesn't work like running a successful business. We have an entirely different budget operation called baseline budgeting that's kind of an anomaly to the federal government. But David's a smart guy, he's hardworking. The biggest asset David has is he's going to have Johnny Isakson there working with him day to day. Johnny is a consummate professional public servant, and he's going to be able to help David and guide him through the minefield that we all as public servants have to go through. And I think the two of them are going to continue to provide great leadership for Georgia.
You really get a hole in one when you were playing in a foursome with the president.
I really did, and it's the only one the president's ever seen. Not only that, but I won money from him.
Well, you can't really talk, even a senator can't really talk smack to the president of the United States, can he?
You know, it was interesting. He told us early on in that round of golf, guys, we're going to talk a little policy, but we're four guys who love the game of golf. We're going to go out and have some fun today. And yeah, he had a couple of 3-foot putts that we let him know that he better concentrate before.
I can't make those either, so.